Good evening and welcome, everyone. I'm Bill Maley, Brighton Town Supervisor, and I'm pleased to welcome you all here to tonight's November 14th, 2018 meeting of the Brighton Town Board. As always, we're pleased to have you watching, whether you're here in the room tonight or whether you are enjoying the meeting remotely, either streaming from our website on our live YouTube feed or watching on our cable access channel. However you're with us, we appreciate your participation. We want to give you the opportunity to share all of the material that we have. So if you are here in the room and would like to review tonight's meeting packet, it's on the table at the very back of the auditorium. If you are watching from home or remotely somewhere else, you can go to the town's website, www.townofbrighton.org, and see all of that same material on our webpage so you can follow along just as we are. So I'm going to start the meeting with a pledge to the flag. I'm going to ask Councilmember DePonzio to lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jason. We will be getting to the open forum in just a moment, but we have a number of proclamations tonight, so I'm going to head up. Is this on? Yes, it is. Good. Okay, we do have a couple of proclamations tonight. First, I want to note that Small Business Saturday is coming up. A week from Saturday, Small Business Saturday is always the Saturday after Thanksgiving. And here in Brighton, our small businesses are particularly important. And we want to take the opportunity to recognize not only Small Business Saturday, but a couple of our small businesses and small business owners that really make our economic environment click. And so to that end, I am going to invite Ned Green and Jordan Betts to join me. And Giuliani, if you want to join us too, you're welcome to. Jordan Betts is the owner of Mint Salon on Monroe Avenue. One of the things that really Jordan and Ned have in common is that not only are they very proficient business owners, but they also give back to the community in many ways. Jordan has served on the board of the Brighton Chamber of Commerce, but she's also engaged in motivational and other activities, making sure her employees are well trained. So it gives me great pleasure to recognize both of them. Let me start with this proclamation for you, Jordan. Whereas Brighton celebrates our local small businesses and the contributions they make to our economy and community, and whereas nationally, small businesses employ nearly half of all private sector employees, and whereas U.S. consumers report that Small Business Saturday positively impacts their communities and encourages them to shop small all year long. Whereas the town of Brighton supports our local businesses and is grateful for the jobs they create, the boost they give to our economy, and the entrepreneurial spirit they represent. And whereas today we honor Jordan Betts and Mint Salon, a well-known hair salon for the curly-haired, which enhances the coterie of fashionable small businesses lining Monroe Avenue. Whereas offering excellent specialized service, Mint Salon is an outstanding example of a successful neighborhood business. Now therefore be it proclaimed that I, William W. Maley, Brighton Town Supervisor, and the members of our Town Council do hereby proclaim November 24th, 2018 as Small Business Saturday and urge the residents of our community to support small businesses and merchants on Small Business Saturday and throughout the year. And this proclamation is signed at today's date by myself and by my colleagues on the town board, and I am pleased to present it to you, Jordan. Don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to give, I have one here for Ned, and then I'll give you both the opportunity, if you'd like, to say a few words. Ned Green is another. You know, we have so many great business owners on the avenue, but as I said a moment ago, Ned and Jordan are two that give back to our community in so many ways. Ned actually serves with me as a member of Brighton Rotary, very active in the Rotary Club and the board of that organization, and really gives back to the community. But you also, every town needs a hardware store, right, and we're lucky to have Whiters. So, whereas Brighton celebrates our local small businesses and the contributions they make to our town economy, and whereas nationally small businesses employ, you've heard this before, nearly half of all private sector employees, and whereas U.S. Consumers Report, I'm going to skip all this because you've heard it before, it's true, but I'm going to go on, whereas today we honor Ned Green and Whiters Paint and Hardware, which has become a valued addition to the stores around the 12 corners. Whereas offering excellent service and helpful information to do-it-yourselfers and professionals alike, Whiters Paint and Hardware is an outstanding example of a successful business and neighborhood staple. Now therefore be it proclaimed that I, William W. Maley, Brighton Town Supervisor, and the members of our Town Council do hereby proclaim November 24th, 2018 as Small Business Saturday and urge the residents of our community to support small businesses and merchants on Small Business Saturday and throughout the year. Jordan, I'm sorry to say I've never been a customer of Mint Salon, even though my hair does have a little wave to it. But I'm certainly always happy to stop into Whiters and appreciate you having you here in town. So I will give you this proclamation, but Jordan, I'll give you the microphone first if you'd like to say something.
Thank you a lot for this. I will say that when I made a decision to come to Brighton with my business, it was probably the best decision I've made. I was on Park Avenue, and it's beautiful and wonderful, but there's nothing like having a community surrounding you and helping you no matter what. The police have answered questions for me, and I'm always there. And it's really nice to be able to have a town that basically has every single thing that you need. There's not one thing in the town of Brighton that you can't walk to or get, so it's really amazing to have. So I thank you for having your business as well, because I'm always needing you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you very much. Bill, thank you for being here to recognize us and for being involved. So you make this a great community, and the fact that you take the time to recognize this shows the support, and the community gets behind that. So thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you both. And again, when we've all heard it, when you shop locally, your dollars stay local. You support other people. You support the employees of these businesses. So yes, Black Friday is a big deal, and people talk about Cyber Monday. But don't forget, Small Business Saturday. Keep it local. Shop small, and we wish you both lots of success. Now I'd like to ask Maddie Schmidt and Peter Jemison to join us. No Peter. No Peter. Okay. Come on up.
He wants to respond to you in writing and
Wonderful.
accept this
Oh,
petition
wonderful.
in writing.
And hang on, because I left something back at the desk. This is a proclamation recognizing November as Native American Heritage Month. Before I present Maddie the proclamation, Maddie's here because of her connection with Ganondagan, but also other local Native American activities. And she reached out to me and asked that we recognize this month, and I'm so glad you did. This is important recognition. First, I want to just read a little bit of information about the Seneca and Native American Heritage Month. November is Native American Heritage Month. It is fitting, it's a good time to open our Brighton Town Board meeting with an acknowledgement that the land we live on was Onondaga. I've been practicing it all day, and it just figures that I would struggle with it. Onondaga,
Right.
Seneca, ancestral land held in common with Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois Confederacy, for hundreds of years before settlers from Europe came to what is now known as Brighton. There are small reminders of the Onondaga ancestral presence in the town in names like the Haudenosaunee Trail, which is the drive that goes into Brookside School and our rec center, Council Rock Avenue, and the landmark Council Rock itself near the intersection of East Avenue and Council Rock. And the Council Rock sat at a junction of Indian trails and was a site for holding tribal councils. The Onondaga were and remain the keepers of the Western Door in the Confederacy. We acknowledge that the confederacies, and this is the Iroquois Confederacy, not the other Confederacy. We acknowledge that the Confederacy's form of government provided a foundation for our federal Constitution. Today we pay respect to Seneca elders past and present who would remind us of our responsibility for stewardship of the land we now occupy. We also want to acknowledge that the Onondaga have survived efforts to remove them from the New York State, and they're still here in Western New York, although their continuing presence may be less visible to most today. A version of the indigenous history of the land before Brighton, along with the history of the town's settlement, is on the town's webpage, and we urge you to read it. You may learn more about the Onondaga's ancestral presence and contemporary culture through the local Native American Cultural Center, by visits to the Ganondagan State Historic Site and Seneca Art and Culture Center in Victor, and by watching the PBS special series, Native America, which in the second episode gives great visibility to the history of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy through the eyes of the contemporary Confederacy, including Onondaga elders. And although this year's Canandaigua Treaty commemoration has just passed, this annual commemoration, always held on November 11th, the day the treaty was signed in 1794, is another way to learn more about the important legacy and ongoing experience of indigenous people in this region. And now I would like to read, I'm not going to read this whole proclamation, I'm going to read part of it. Whereas today we honor the history and culture of Native Americans and recognize the great contributions that Ganondagan State Historical Site and its Seneca Art and Cultural Center make to our understanding and appreciation of the rich legacy of the Senecas. And whereas we also thank Peter Jemison, manager of the Ganondagan, for his extraordinary leadership and exemplary educational programs and outreach, as his work and the vision of Ganondagan embody cultural diversity, keeping the past and present lives of the Haudenosaunee people relevant to us all. Now therefore be it proclaimed that I, William W. Maley, Brighton Town Supervisor, and members of our Town Council do hereby proclaim and recognize November as Native American Heritage Month in the town of Brighton. And we ask that our residents not only share in this observance, but also celebrate the fact that the town of Brighton is built on diversity and the idealism of inclusion and acceptance. And our Native American forefathers and contemporaries are very much a part of that inclusion and acceptance. And this proclamation is signed November 14th, 2018, by myself and by my colleagues on the town board. And I will give this to you, Maddie, and I know you'll share it with Peter, and if you'd like to say a few words.
Sure. I saw Pete Jemison this weekend, and he expected to be here. He knew that this honor was being bestowed by the town of Brighton, and it means a great deal to him. He's had a very bad cold, and I suspect that has something to do with why he very belatedly said that he could not be here tonight. But he said that he would like to respond to this proclamation in writing to the town, and thank you for the recognition. And I'll keep working on making sure he gets here, and I may just persuade him to come and share that letter with you in December.
That would be fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, next, as we always do, we will continue with our open forum. The open forum is an opportunity for anyone to attend our meeting, ask questions, comments about any item they may have, whether or not it's actually on our agenda tonight. I would note that we have a couple of public hearings tonight, and if you're here to speak at either one of those public hearings, I would encourage you, if you would like your comments to be included as part of the record of those public hearings, to wait until we actually do call them. If you are at home or somewhere else watching but would like to relay a comment or a question, you can call 303-3060. That's 303-3060. Someone will take your call and share it with me. And if you are deaf or hearing impaired, we also have a TDD line that you can call if you'd like to participate in the open forum. Our TDD line is 784-5205. 784-5205 is our TDD line if you are deaf or hearing impaired and would like to participate in our open forum. So the floor is now open for the open forum. If you would like to speak, I would ask that you raise your hand, and when you're recognized, come on up to the podium and address the board. Nick?
Which microphone?
That one, yes.
This one?
Yeah.
So, our youngest son started at Brighton High School
Nick,
this fall.
if you would give your name and address.
Right on. My name's Nicholas Wilt, and I live at 2695 East Avenue. Our youngest son is a freshman at Brighton High School, and just started on the swim team. So he forgot something that he needed at school and texted me from school and asked that I drop it off at the school. So I went to Brighton High School, and At the security desk, I was struck because there was a police officer there with the security guy. And I asked him, you know, like sort of, what are you doing here? And he was like, oh, this is just it's a program the chief has in place. I don't go any further, he said, but you know, here I am. And I was kind of like, did the chief give you exit criteria? You know, how do you know when to leave the school grounds? He was like, no, sounded like a very vague mission. And I said, I thought we'd put a stop to that. That was my recollection. And no, not as far as I know, he said. So I went about my day, but I did some legwork this afternoon to see why it was that I thought we'd stop the program. Let me see if my phone still has this Facebook post on the Brighton Central School District's Facebook page from October 26th, because the discussion I had with the officer comes, as you know, on the heels of a very active thought exchange discussion of whether police officers should be doing directed foot patrols in the high school. And the statement reads as follows. It says, "Dear members of the BHS school community, thank you for your response to the recent thought exchange regarding safety at Brighton High School, and more specifically about BPD foot patrols. We received a significant amount of feedback and are very excited to be sharing the information with you today. This exchange was very useful in gathering thoughts from many community members. In fact, there were 499 participants and 427 thoughts shared. We have already used this information to re-examine our work with BPD and to shift from foot patrols to the development of new programming that will better meet our objectives without ever compromising school safety. As these new programs are developed, they will be shared with you. As always, we welcome your feedback." So the reason I'm here tonight is because I think this statement and maybe some related statements that emanated from the school district were what gave me the impression that the directed foot patrols were no longer a thing. But my experience today suggests that they're still ongoing. So I'm here to ask the board, and I see the chief is here, to comment on the current status of the foot patrols and the programs that are alluded to in the statement.
I will ask the chief.
I'll address it, Mr. Supervisor. The officer was there to talk to the security staff at the security checkpoint. The directed foot patrols inside the school have been temporarily stopped. I will be at the school tomorrow for a program. The program is called Pizza with the Chief. I will be in full uniform addressing 125 or so students. I will be bringing the pizza for them. I spoke with Dr. McGowan today. This afternoon, I had heard that there was some type of an interaction between a member of the public and a member of my staff. Our foot patrols are not occurring inside the school. It is common practice for our officers to interact with security at the main desk. It's common practice for our officers to act with public throughout the community, and that's what occurred today.
Thank you, Mark.
So just as a quick follow-up, the thought exchange had pretty prevalent discussion on the merits of a presence of police officers who have lethal force at their disposal in the school buildings at all. So I guess, and I believe the status before the thought exchange was the same. The officers would come and they wouldn't go any further. So as I understand it, it sounds like there haven't been any changes to the policy. Am I wrong about that?
I think you are. I think you misunderstood what occurred during the thought exchange. The foot patrols, the officers were inside the school building, both at the high school and at the middle school, conducting foot patrols in the hallway. I agreed to temporarily suspend that effort while the thought exchange was occurring. The supervisor and I met with Dr. McGowan and Mr. Alamo and Dr. Hall to discuss the next evolution of the foot patrols. The foot patrols have not continued inside the school. The interaction with the front desk has occurred and will continue to occur, as far as I can perceive, until the foreseeable future. It is very important that my staff interact with the security. I talked to Dr. Hall today. I also will be coming and interacting with the security. I think it's an important part of our response protocols to the high school, as well as responsibility to the community.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to address the board during the open forum? Josh?
Hello. For those who don't know, my name is Josh Barth. I'm the county legislator for the 24th District, which includes parts of southeast Rochester as well as parts of north central Brighton. And occasionally I like to come into the town board meeting and to give a brief report on what's been going on at the county level. The update for this particular meeting will be that we actually received the formal budget proposal for the Monroe County yesterday at the full legislature meeting. Although it was a publicly available document 2 or 3 days prior to the election, which I think is actually a step in the right direction. It'd be nice to have a budget proposal debated and finalized before then, but it's a step in the right direction. The main thing I want to say about the budget is that we're going through it now, and we're looking at the spending patterns and the priorities that reflects, and hopefully we'll have a better understanding of that in the near future. But I did need to address a misconception that is out there, and the statements are being made that somehow the county budget reflects a tax cut, and it does not. The county budget reflects a tax rate decrease of 10 cents per $1,000 of assessed value, which sounds a lot like a tax cut, but in fact, we're having a tax increase this year of over 3%, which is going to be a surprise to quite a few people when they get their tax bill. It's going to go up. And that's actually the highest rate of increase we've seen since 2007, where the tax increase was over 5%. And so this is something that we want to make sure that we address. And more importantly, if we're going to be raising additional taxes, that we're spending in a way that actually reflects the priorities and values of our county. And so that's what we'll be doing. The other thing I want to point out and addresses. We've received our packet, and every month we receive a collection of local laws and referrals that are drafted by the county executive branch, and they send it to the county legislature for its approval. And normally these packets in the past several years have been very thin, except now they're a lot thicker. And most of the referrals that we've received have to do with essentially establishing contracts with different vendors for term services or to establish relationships with other vendors as well to provide services that the county itself does not do, as well as some rate change potential for the Pure Waters District, and we'll be looking at that more deeply because as it stands now, there's a potential increase that's possible for the Pure Waters District that we're hoping does not occur. So we're concerned about the tax revenue side of things with the current budget, but we're going to be looking into that and addressing that in the hearings that we have on our upcoming committee meetings. And that's another reason for me to be here, is to invite each and every one of you, both here in person and watching, to, if you can, attend a committee hearing on the budget. A lot of interesting questions are asked and answered, and it's a good time to understand what we're actually spending our funds on and being aware of them. So our committee meetings are typically on the fourth Monday and Tuesdays of any given month. And in this case, the committee hearings will be November 26th and November 27th, so the Monday and Tuesday. In addition, Ways and Means will be having a special committee meeting on December 6th. If you have the stamina to be in for a 5-6 hour long committee hearing, that's the one to attend because we will discuss everything. And so that's actually something I'd urge you to attend to if you could possibly do so. If you can't, it can be viewed on YouTube after the fact. And so if you're interested in county governance and the county legislature, that's also another avenue for you to become more aware. And finally, a vote on the budget will occur in December 11th, the full legislature meeting. I would again urge anyone who wishes to make comment to attend that meeting and to express what you would like us to do in terms of the budget that would reflect your values and your priorities. And that's my report for today. I just wanted to make sure that because the budget was out there, that we had an opportunity to recognize that and to address some of the main points.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you for, coming on a regular basis. We appreciate it. Just one sort of process question that I have. Has the county legislature or the county executive, I understand that you now can view this hearing after the fact on YouTube. Has there ever been any consideration given to simulcasting those meetings, that hearing, as we simulcast our budget hearings, and giving people the opportunity to comment on a remote basis or by any other alternate means? Is that something that is potentially feasible?
It's absolutely feasible, and we have had in prior years brief discussions about simulcasting, although not about necessarily calling in. I can't attest to that, but we were rebuffed on the grounds that it would cost too much in terms of funding, which I believe to be a relatively inaccurate thing to say. My belief is if we had different priorities and a desire for more open and transparent processing, we would in fact do that, and I think we can do that. And it's by reference to the fact that we can do that here at the town level, we can clearly do it at the county level. It's not any more difficult.
I mean, I don't want to create any illusions. We don't get a lot of comments that are called in. What we do get actually sometimes, though, are people that come in. They come in late to the meeting. They say, I was watching the meeting and I saw you discussing XYZ. And they say, I wanted to come in and talk about it. And so they do, and we welcome that. So, okay.
That would be fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you for that update.
Thank you all.
Is there anyone else that would? Yes, sir.
Michael Farish, 148 Greystone Lane. I've been a resident of Brighton all my life from second grade on. I wasn't going to speak on the topic that I just heard. I was going to speak about the discipline of the police department. I'm trying to understand why it's a negative to have armed policemen in our schools when every other week we hear about shootings in schools. Do the security people have guns? Are they armed?
They are.
I can answer that. They are not armed, sir.
So they are not armed. So how is a security guard that's unarmed going to prevent someone who's sick with a gun coming into our schools and shooting them up? I'm just curious, since this gentleman obviously has a big negative feeling towards armed police in the schools, how does that happen?
I don't have an answer for you, sir.
Why is it a negative to have Brighton police in the schools? Who started this ridiculous concept? I had children in Brighton schools. We were not at a time when things like this happened, but it is the time now. It happens now, every other week. And I hope my grandson goes to Brighton schools, but he's going to be protected by an unarmed security guard. Is the person going to counsel the person coming in to shoot up the school and hope that that stops him? I'm totally disgusted with this kind of attitude. We should be thankful that we have a police force like this and that they consider coming into the schools to protect our kids. So I'll talk about the other topic. Yeah, you can come up. I'd like to hear from you.
Let me, Mr. Farish, if you want to talk about you wanted to talk later at the public hearing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I just can't understand this animosity towards police. We never had it before on this board. There's been plenty of administrations here, plenty of police chiefs. We've had excellent policing and excellent boards and supervisors. So I don't understand it. I hope to understand it before my grandson goes to Brighton schools. Thank you.
I do want to just comment, and then Mr. Wilt, and I, as always, I want to remind everybody that comments should be directed to the board and not to other members of the audience or other speakers. But I'll simply say, speaking for myself, I absolutely support the police department. The police department in Brighton, there is none finer in the state of New York, top to bottom, led by our police chief. And I think the chief did describe some ongoing dialogue that has been engaged in with the school community. But as he also said, this is the chief and I and leadership of the school district have and no doubt will continue to discuss the police role as it relates to our schools. And Mark, if you'd like to say something further.
I raised my opinion before. I think engaging with school staff, engaging with students is an important thing. I read the results of the thought exchange. The conversation is ongoing. There's a conversation with the faith community who is requesting a police presence, trying to fulfill all the requests from the community. By no means has there been a final decision from a policing perspective as to the movement forward with the schools. But I think tomorrow, the program that we're going to engage upon tomorrow is going to be an important one. We did it last year.
I was going to say, you've done pizza with the chief before.
It just gives an opportunity for the young people who are stakeholders to directly interact with myself so that we can talk about what it is from a policing perspective we're doing. You brought up safety. I'm trying to develop relationships.
Thank you.
I would like to add something. There is unvarnished support for the police in this community and on this board. And I do not think that comments to the effect that we do not necessarily want police within our schools represent animosity towards the police department. There was an ongoing discussion. Mr. Welt referenced a thought exchange. That was a public forum in which over 500 members of this community participated in. And the results are public, and if you would like to understand the spectrum of opinions that were expressed, those can be made available to you. But again, I think it's important that we do not conflate this discussion with any sort of animosity towards our police department, because I do think there is place for valid discussion regarding the role that the role that our police department is going to play in community policing, and to what extent that involves our schools.
I would definitely like to see the thought discussion, but the animosity didn't come from me. You can see that I support the Brighton police, and I support them in the schools as much as we can have them in the schools. The gentleman that spoke here was angry about the fact that Brighton police were still in the schools. That's where the animosity is coming from.
And sir, I'm just saying that I wouldn't characterize that as animosity. I would characterize that as wanting to be informed as to what role the community has decided the Brighton police will play with regard to policing the schools.
I have no argument with that, but you
Can
know what?
Can I weigh in on that?
I just want to finish.
Yeah.
I have no argument with what you're saying, but my opinion is as valid as yours.
Chief?
Robin, you mentioned about the community directing the police services. I believe that's what my job is as the chief of police. I certainly welcome community input, I certainly welcome the thoughts of the community, but as far as directing the staff of the police department, I answer to the board, and I believe that's my authority as the chief of police.
And no, I've said the community playing a role in community, in developing, I can't even remember what I said, but the fact is the community is a stakeholder, and I think that we need to listen to the community.
The entire community, I agree with you as well as the thought exchange, what occurred in the thought exchange. I have the original results. I hosted a community meeting. I heard from students. I saw citizens talking to each other, not agreeing in concurrence with what should happen in the school. I understand that my goal, my work in the community, the Brighton community and the Rochester community, is to foster relationships between the police and the entire community. And, you know, what I heard, Mr. Wilt, you're going to get up again and speak, is a concern that a police officer was standing at a security desk. That concerns me. They're doing exactly what I asked them to do, is to interact with the security staff. And you know, I followed up based on what I heard, how the interaction went at the school. I talked to the administration at the school, and I asked them if they were under the impression that we were going to cease that directed patrol to the security desk, and they said no, that they welcomed that, and they understood that that was going to continue. I was surprised to hear that a citizen raised a concern about that today. And I would think that any citizen that's got a concern can contact me directly and meet and ask me directly about my directive to staff. I'm concerned about that. But I believe that community engagement and interaction between police officers and the community are an important thing, in my opinion.
And Chief, you have walked that talk throughout. You have led the department with a commitment to the concept and the reality of community policing. Mr. Wilt?
I would invite the chief and this gentleman and, review my comments. They were dispassionate. I had a misapprehension I was genuinely confused, and I had a question. But the school shootings were just alluded to, and I think it is important to craft public policy in light of data and concrete information. And the fact of the matter is, it is extremely unlikely for children to die in that manner. I'm going to quote from an article in the Washington Post. I have to paraphrase. The chance of dying this way is far lower than almost any other mortality risk a kid faces, including, and they have links to, traveling to and from school, catching a potentially deadly disease while in school, or suffering a life-threatening injury playing interscholastic sports. Traveling to and from school, that consideration and the role that the police could play in maximizing student safety at the 12 corners, where the middle school and the high school are in very close proximity, that was a very active part of the thought exchange discussion. So I would invite anyone who's interested to go review that, and also review the facts regarding the prevalence of risks. I understand the human psychology that's informing this. You know, some people are scared to fly because it makes huge news when people die in that manner. But from a statistical standpoint, it is an extremely safe way to travel. And that's an analogy that I would offer as we discuss public policies relating to school shootings and overall student safety.
Juliana?
Hi, I'm Juliana. This is a discussion really upset me. I just wanted to thank Chief Henderson for sending police in because it does make me feel more comfortable in my school. And I did not know this was an issue until now, listening to this discussion. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Juliana.
So Julia, we can continue our discussion tomorrow with pizza with the chief, and I would ask that you ask your classmates to join me as well. Thanks.
And I want to express my own opinion. I support the police department's effort to respond to the school's request for assistance in looking at their security practices. I believe that the police department has to become familiarized with our school. The only way they're going to familiarize themselves is to enter the school. That some students may feel threatened by the police and so forth, I think that's very unfortunate, and I know the chief is working every way he can to dispel any such concerns. But for the police department to properly provide a response in the unlikely event that that might occur, they have to be trained. And the only way to train is on-site, and it cannot be done in an empty building. It has to be a live building. We have to see how the children move within the building, how they react to different emergency scenarios. And I do not see any way that the police can do that and be properly trained without entering the building. I generally have not heard an outcry about the community being against the police being in that school, and that's the purpose of the survey and the chief's outreach. I do not support, however, a full-time armed security guard in our school. I don't know that that's necessary. We do have a very able police department just down the road. And if an event occurs, we have to be ready, and I support the police training, the chief's training efforts in that regard.
Thank you, Chris. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board during our open forum? Hearing none, we will continue on with our agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Dan, please call the roll.
Councilmember DePonzio?
Aye.
Councilmember Werner?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilt?
Aye.
Supervisor Mealy?
Aye. We'll now begin our public hearings for this evening. As I mentioned before, we do have two public hearings scheduled for tonight. The first one is the proposed police disciplinary procedures local law. Dan, has the necessary legal notice been given in this matter?
Yes, Supervisor, I had it open now. I've just lost it. My apologies. Brighton, it was in the Brighton Pittsburgh Post on October 25th.
Thank you. Notice having been given of this public hearing, I declare the public hearing to be open. Chief, would you like to
Actually, I'll
say a
defer
few
to
words about
Mr. Gordon.
or Ken?
So what you have before you is a local law that is proposed under the town board's authority, under Town Law Section 155, which delegates to the town boards the power and authority to adopt and make rules and regulations for the examination, hearing, investigation, and determination of charges made or preferred against any member or members of the police department. In 2000, let me just make sure I have the right date here.
12, I think.
That's what I was going to say. 2012, Supervisor, is right. In 2012, the New York State Court of Appeals decided a case in the matter of Wallkill. Wallkill is another town in the state. And in that case, the Court of Appeals was deciding whether police disciplinary matters could be the subject of collective bargaining agreements and the provisions of collective bargaining agreements. And the Court of Appeals held that the subject of police discipline resides with the town board and, most importantly, is a prohibited subject of collective bargaining. So, in compliance with that Wallkill decision, the chief and I, along with the supervisor, looked at what our current contract provides, which does have a section, the current police contract does have a section on police disciplinary matters, considered what the authority is of this board under Town Law Section 155, and then further considered what the Court of Appeals said in the Wallkill decision, and came to the very clear conclusion that we could not continue to operate under that collective bargaining agreement without running afoul of the Wallkill decision. And so the local law that is proposed before you sets up a procedure for the town board to act as effectively a board to hear police disciplinary matters when they are brought against officers of the Brighton Police Department. That's a general summary of why we're doing what we're doing and what we're doing, without going into the actual details of the procedure which are set forth in the law.
Thank you, Ken. Is there anyone that would like to address the town board concerning this proposed local law? Mr. Ferris?
Thank you very much. I'm a little confused. Right now, disciplinary action is conducted by the chief.
Disciplinary action purports to be conducted under a collective bargaining agreement. As the town attorney indicated.
I can answer
ahead.
maybe perhaps the way it currently exists. If there is a disciplinary matter, the contract outlines procedural timelines, steps, methods, pass a discipline that a member can take if they are deemed, in my opinion, to be in violation of misconduct or violation of policy. There is currently a collective bargaining agreement that identifies the steps and procedures for that.
So is that going to be different if the town board takes over that position?
So the way I understand it, and I'll talk about Wallkill, the different paths that a member of the police department can currently choose include the option of operating under Town Law 155, a section of the Civil Service Law, or binding arbitration. And binding arbitration is a third party, and it was ultimately the decisions of arbitrators that the town of Wallkill turned to the court for relief. And basically, the decision, again, correct me if I'm overstepping my non-lawyer approach.
You're doing fine, Chief.
Okay, so my understanding is the Court of Appeals in Wallkill basically stated that it was the town board that has the ultimate authority pursuant to Town Law 155 for disciplinary matters. We currently do not have a situation of discipline that is driving this. And as I talked to the board and I advised the board, you know, the provisions of Wallkill, that there is due process, and I know there's counsel here from the association that will speak to the matter tonight. There is still due process. There is still will be the presentation of evidence. There's some time constraints that are built into the law, but ultimately the same disciplinary process that we have deployed since I've been the chief since 2010, and prior to that I started in November of 1986, with the exception of the final determiner being a series of 3, it's going to be one body that will be the final determiner of the disciplinary process.
Okay, I guess how much of that do you influence?
How I've influenced?
How do you influence the final decision? I mean, do you present this to the board? And I know, is the board, any of the board retired police officers?
No.
So you have no professional experience at all in policing?
Well, I can tell you how discipline currently works, and I anticipate it will be the same if this board were to adopt Wallkill. Once I'm advised of a potential breach and we've launched some type of an investigatory process, I advise the supervisor of an incident that is being reviewed. When I make the determination that a policy was breached or misconduct occurred and I wish to proceed with discipline, I then brief the entire board. And then I make a recommendation what that discipline should be. I deploy the theory of progressive discipline. And there are certain parts of the rules, manual of rules, that state that termination can be part of the disciplinary process, and that is discussed with the board.
So you don't feel that this adoption of this law undermines your authority in any way?
So it does not undermine my authority. It just changes the path in which I turn for the final decision. I can tell you that one of the methods, and maybe Mr. DeBolt and I can talk about it in a moment, is a summary proceeding where once a determination is made at my level that discipline is warranted, we then negotiate some type of an agreed upon disciplinary nature. It's called summary discipline. Since I've been the chief, that has been the path 100% of the time. There's been a recommended period of discipline. The board, I've worked now for 2 supervisors as a chief, and the board and different board members. Those boards have adopted the recommendation, and we've agreed upon a final disciplinary determination.
So you're comfortable with that process and how it's worked?
So I can also tell you that we have not had a matter that has gone to arbitration. Under my, I date myself, but I've been here since 1986, and I have served in a number of capacities in the Patrol Association. I am aware of a situation in the 1980s that resulted in a disciplinary matter that went to arbitration, and the arbitrator ultimately ruled on separation from employment.
Okay, I'm concerned when non-professionals make rulings over professionals.
And maybe, Mr. Farish, maybe I can clear up some misunderstanding there. So the charges are initiated by the chief, and the chief will sit down with the officer and review those charges. And the hope is always that the chief and the officer are able to come to some understanding and agreement as to how those charges should be ultimately handled. And the chief will come to a decision as to what the chief thinks, within the chief's discretion, he thinks ought to be imposed. Now, if the officer doesn't like it, then the officer can ask for a hearing, and that hearing would then come to the town board, but not for the town board itself to hold a hearing, but for the town board to then select a hearing officer. And that hearing officer might well be somebody with police experience who has the expertise and understanding to more thoroughly understand those issues of police discipline. That hearing officer conducts a hearing, listens to both sides, and then presents that report and recommendation to the town board. Now, it is up to the town board to either accept or reject that. I will tell you that since I've been town attorney, when a recommendation is made by an outside professional to this board, and this board realizes that it does not bear the experience of that outside professional, generally speaking, the board's going to listen to that outside professional. That's why we bring in those outside professionals.
But I would certainly say we don't do so blindly.
Oh, no, not blindly, but yeah. So that I don't want you to get the impression that there is a hearing conducted by the town board in bank, the whole town board, who then would make a determination. It is, in fact, an outside hearing officer who holds the hearing, selected by the town board, that hearing officer, and then reports. After that process is concluded and the town board makes its final determination as to the discipline, there is still the right of the officer, if the officer is displeased with that, to challenge the town board's decision through a court proceeding and taking it in front of a state Supreme Court judge. So it's a pretty thorough process.
It sounds it, and I guess my only concern is we've had a great police department for as long as I've been here with many different chiefs. We've been blessed with some great supervisors in their board, and I hope that continues. I'm glad that you do support the chief at the level you do.
We expect it to continue.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Is there anyone else that would, yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Keith Woodard, and I'm the president of the Brighton Police Patrol Association. I'm here to speak to you tonight regarding your intentions to amend Brighton Town Code and enact New York State Town Law Section 155, or more so commonly referred to as the Wallkill Resolution. The BPPA and its membership would like to state that we are wholeheartedly opposed to this legislation as it pertains to police discipline. The outlines enacted by the Taylor Law in 1967 have given public employee labor unions the right to binding arbitration in regards to labor disputes for 50 years and have been practiced successfully in this town. I've had the privilege to work alongside some great men and women during my time here in Brighton. I truly believe there's not a more professional group of officers anywhere in the country than the members we have here. Your decision to enact the Wallkill Resolution will be a direct shot at the integrity of the officers employed by the town of Brighton. The BPPA has consistently demonstrated our willingness to adopt and enact the policies that you, the town board, have felt necessary. We accepted body cameras. We welcome the transparency of policing, while other agencies have been far more resistant. We have embraced the community engagement initiative of the Chief of Police, and we have shown our willingness to be a part of the community. To put it bluntly, we do not have a discipline problem here in Brighton. Furthermore, we have shown our willingness to compromise with the town and come to amicable solutions on many issues. However, we feel that your unilateral move to drastically change our discipline proceedings and our suggestions and requests have been met with an unwillingness to compromise. The current draft legislation under Section 127.4, hearing on notice of complaint, we believe that 10 days notice of the hearing should be changed to a mutually agreed upon date. Or at a minimum, have it put into legislation that an adjournment may be given based upon the unavailability of a lawyer or a witness. We feel that the 10-day notice is an unfair timeline, especially with the different, evidence that can be brought up in these cases. Body camera footage, witness statements. Secondly, we believe rather than the town appointing this hearing officer, which Mr. Gordon just spoke on, that a neutrally selected hearing officer be selected by the town and the BPPA. We believe this is the only fair, and the town would still retain the right to reject our recommendation. And Mr. Gordon made comment or mentioned that the town would seek a professional outside opinion or an outside hearing officer. However, currently in the draft legislation, there's no mention of any sort of, nothing is defined as professional. In all fairness, the town can choose anybody that they so choose to be the hearing officer. That doesn't stipulate a professional with police experience or anything like that. Let me see where I was at. Furthermore, with that, the BPPA is offering to split the costs of the hearing officer with the town. With all this being said, the BPPA would still like to make it clear that we are not in support of this legislation. I don't know how familiar the board is with the municipalities that have enacted similar legislation. But for example, the town of Wallkill Police Department was perhaps one of the most corrupt police agencies in this country. There were widespread allegations of intimidation, illegal traffic stops, harassment, and predatory sexual assault. I think closer to home, I think we're all familiar with the town of Greece and the numerous arrests, allegations of misconduct and corruption that took place there. And within my research, I understood that when the Court of Appeals made this decision, they said it would affect approximately 1,600 municipalities within the state of New York. And with that, I found 3 that have enacted this legislation. Wallkill, the town of Greece, and with a similar law, the city of Schenectady, with the second-class cities law. And with this, again, with the city of Schenectady, they enacted this after numerous allegations of harassment, intimidation, and arrest, the indictment and conviction of 9 police officers. And the BPPA would like to make it clear that the message you would be sending by enacting this legislation to our membership is that we are on par with these police agencies. I urge the board members here tonight to research these agencies and the allegations and compare your police department with them before you decide to vote. We feel that this legislation only politicizes police discipline, which is a very hot topic amongst all of us right now. And furthermore, we wholeheartedly feel this legislation is not necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board? Hearing none, I declare this public hearing.
Well, before you declare the public hearing closed, I don't know if there's any comments that the town board wants to make on the record of the public hearing.
Well, sure, that's right. I mean, obviously, the board can make comments either in discussion of a motion or on the record of the public hearing. So, yes. Is there anyone on the board that would like to?
I'll start with a question, because I know there was some discussion about the summary disciplinary procedure that the department has engaged in the past successfully. Will that summary procedure still be available under the local law?
My understanding with your proposed resolution, everything that we've done in the past will continue to be handled in the same manner, the same function. In speaking with Mr. Woodard's comment about the time period, I'm looking at a current contract provision that talks about a 24-hour period. Now, once a determination is made at my level of bringing forward disciplinary charges, there's a window of less than 1 day to respond. This legislation has 10 days. As I mentioned to the supervisor, and I'll talk to the association, and Keith, I don't know if you want to address me from the podium, and if you want council to join you at the podium. Mr. DeBoe, we've experienced disciplinary proceedings in the past, and it's been, the way that I do business is that once a determination that discipline will move forward, we communicate to the union president our intention of moving forward with disciplinary charges. We allow, even before the charges are filed, an opportunity for discussion. I've had discussion with you on disciplinary matters in the past, and I've worked with the previous attorney, Mr. Andalina, on my findings, my determination, and what my recommendation would be to the board. As long as I'm in this seat, that was my intent on how to handle moving forward. So if there's a concern about a 10-day time frame and the unavailability of yourself or the unavailability of a member of your firm, I do not have to bring those charges forward until we've agreed upon, or we've had an opportunity to at least preliminarily talk about that. So I don't know if that eases the concern about the time frame, or
the 10-day concern with the 10-day time frame was more when it gets to the Dan DeBolt, the attorney for the union. I apologize
Thanks,
for
Dan,
my
sorry.
voice. Our concern on the 10-day time period was when it gets to the hearing stage, that the way this is drafted, it's the hearing officer unilaterally says, all right, your hearing is now 10 days from now, here it is, and there's no, it's not mutually agreed upon, there's nothing in there for adjournments. If we say, our witnesses are unavailable, anything like that. That was our concern with the 10 days was later in the process than trying to work something out before a hearing is required.
Okay, so the way that I viewed that and the way that I weighed into council is I didn't see that obstacle at that time.
Right, so there's several 10-day periods in this local law. There's a 10-day period for serving the notice of complaint once a charge is preferred or determined. There's a period of time for the officer to request a hearing. That's also a 10-day period. And then I think what you're talking about is what I'll call the final 10-day period. Well, it's not the final, but the next 10-day period, which is a hearing officer must be selected. By the way, the board has 45 days to select the hearing officer, but once the hearing officer is selected on whatever day, once that hearing officer determines when that hearing officer is going to hold that hearing, that's the 10-day notice that you're talking about. Here's your notice of hearing. You know, today is the 14th of November. Your hearing's on the 24th of November. And you're saying the concern is that whether counsel's not available or witnesses are not available, that might present a problem. I think that's
Correct.
summarizing the concern. And that's something certainly the board could take up in discussing once we get to that point as to whether that is an amendment to the local law the board would like to take up.
I'm an attorney. I have attorneys to my right and my left, and the town attorney. I'm not much of a litigator myself, but each of the three of you have. The CPLR, for example, and has a number of deadlines set forth in it, and it is not unusual for counsel for different parties to agree on an adjournment. That's part of practicing law. Is that a fair analogy to this timeline?
This timeline is a little shorter than what you'd find in the CPLR.
Of course.
And I guess the concern would be there is no language in the local law that would suggest that an adjournment is even allowed. And perhaps whether you want to say instead of 10 days, it should be 20 days, or if you want to say it's on 10 days' notice, however, the hearing may be adjourned at the officer's request to accommodate the availability of witnesses and legal representation. Language to that effect, essentially. Either of those might address this particular concern. I think what the union is looking for very specifically is to mutually agree upon a hearing date. I would not recommend that because you could have a recalcitrant officer who just is never going to agree upon a hearing date. So I don't think you want to do that, but to have something expressly built in there that would tell the hearing officer, you may adjourn this if you want to adjourn this one time, or whatever language you want to put in there to accommodate the availability of witnesses and legal representation. I don't, Chief, do you have an opinion on that?
I don't, and in trying to codify and work with you to codify what we currently have with what would be the proposed 155, I came up with the 10-day period because it would reflect what the current practice is. If you believe that a initial 20-day would work, I don't know. Mr. DeBolt, you work with the town of Greece. The town of Greece currently has Wallkill. Do they have a provision for agreed upon hearing dates?
Off the top of my head, I don't know whether it's mutually agreed or unilaterally set by the hearing officer. Even having, the extra time or the specifics built in there authorizing an adjournment really isn't so much of an issue where you've got a neutral, mutually agreed upon hearing officer. That's normally how things get scheduled. Our concern here is more than usual because if the determination has been made for political reasons or whatever to get rid of an officer, and the hearing officer is not a neutral, it's someone the town board has picked with the clear message, schedule this, no adjournments, get this guy fired. So now little things like the timing, become important. Really, that's almost eliminated if we have a neutral hearing officer who's mutually selected, because he's going to schedule it at a time that works for both parties. That's how the process normally works.
So I can't speak on behalf of our current labor lawyer, Mary Lou Conroe. She's back.
Correct.
We just recently went through a hearing process where it was the town that chose the hearing officer. Would you agree with that last matter that we, through Coughlin Gerhardt, through yourself, that was not was that a mutually agreed upon
The
hearing
disability
officer?
one with Ronaldo?
Yes.
Yeah, we agreed on that one.
Okay. I was under the impression that was selected by management. That was because our contract was silent to the selection of that hearing officer. I believe we were advised that the decision to select the hearing officer was strictly a management's decision because the contract was silent.
And that is consistent with with certainly the intent of Section 155.
No, I'm sure that was mutually selected because we got half of his significant bill.
And I will not disagree and argue that was not a significant bill. So I'll defer to the board, I'll defer to council as to what that recommendation is. But as far as the mechanics and the logistics of bringing charges forward, if you were to adopt greater timelines, there is a process in place. If there's an officer that's under investigation and under charges, there is a process under administrative leave, civil service law. You can remove an officer from active duty. Well, would you agree with that? That you can remove them from on-duty status until some of this is resolved?
You've always got the right to remove them from service. The question just becomes when you can stop their pay.
Correct.
But yes, you've got the ability to do that.
Right. So if we were to build in some timelines that may be mutually agreeable to both parties, but that if there's a concern from the board that an officer pending a disciplinary proceeding, we have the ability to remove them from active duty. And you're right, as to whether it's a paid or unpaid status, there's some civil service law that governs that.
Generally, you got 30 days.
30 days to
do it
pay.
unpaid, and then they have to go back unpaid until we get to the hearing.
Yep.
On the other hand, that 30 days, I would certainly not be comfortable with any language that allows a delay in setting that hearing date to run that clock and force the person to go back on pay. So if there were to be any types of extensions granted, I would think that there would have to be an equivalent extension on that unpaid leave time.
I mean, I don't know if I should weigh in. That's a matter of civil service law. And
Right, which is a concern that I have with a process that can become extended. You know, I know we have guidance from council relating to the other question, and I concur that consistent with the intent of Section 155, the hearing officer would be selected by the town board. Some accommodation on a timeline to reflect, you know, what really is, I think, some normal practice doesn't terribly trouble me, although it does trouble me that it could wind up extending the process in such a way that that administrative leave returns to a paid basis.
I will say that my reading of this is not that the hearing will be within the 10 days. It is that the sworn officer, so within 10 days of service on the sworn officer of the written communication from the chief informing the sworn officer of the departmental charges and proposed disciplinary action, the sworn officer may request a hearing before the town board by filing a written demand. So that is just for the request for the hearing. That request for the hearing must be made within 10 days.
Yeah,
Correct.
That is, so,
I see three different.
That's
But-
one of the 10-day periods.
right,
I see
right,
three
right.
different 10-day periods.
Right,
The first
right,
one
but-
is, I'm sorry, Robert. you go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, but none of those 10 days say that is a time within which a hearing is going to be held.
If you
So-
take, well,
My reading is that there are three 10-day periods.
Right.
And a 45-day period.
And
Right.
45, but the 10 days is for the chief to engage the officer in summary discipline. And then if the officer feels he would like a hearing before the board, he can give notice within 10 days after that.
Right.
We have to then select an arbitrator within 45 days.
A hearing
A
officer.
hearing officer, excuse
Yeah.
me. And then the hearing officer or someone determines a hearing date at that point, and the officer is entitled to at least 10 days' notice before that hearing date.
And that's the
So
10
it
days.
could be as short as 10 days from the date of notice, but it's not my experience that that's how it works, but this is what we've got in here. It's not
right, so,
written in stone, and the chief said he had selected the 10 days as being not an unreasonable time. Extensions of that, again, my experience as an attorney, adjournments are more common than not. But I am concerned about the ability to extend out that hearing date indefinitely while pay continues, when there could be something that could be negotiated at that time, I suppose. But at this point, it's a 10-day minimum notice. It could be a 60-day hearing, and with notice 60 days ahead of time. It's just the statute says 10. If the officer wants to extend it out and is willing to go on unpaid leave at that point, I suppose all the more reason why there could be flexibility. But it's not like you say, Robin, it's not a 10-day hearing at all. It's just a minimum notice of 10 days.
so for record clarity sake, the sentence we're talking about is the last sentence of proposed section 127.4.
Correct.
Exactly.
Which presently reads, "Notice of the date, time, and location of the hearing shall be hand-delivered or sent by certified mail to the address of the sworn officer named in the charges no later than 10 days prior to the date of the scheduled hearing."
That's what we're looking at.
That's what we're looking at.
We, in answer to your question, Jason, it's usually during that period, and it's been my experience that's upon the determination of charges and a discussion of potential disciplinary action is usually where the summary occurs. And that's in consultation with attorney, our labor counsel and union counsel. And my experience has been near 100% summary decision with some type of a mediated settlement for discipline.
The universe of hearing officers versus arbitrators, because right now, under the current CBA, it goes to arbitration and then...
Well, that's one path.
It's
So,
one-
so,
it's
so
one-
the negotiating process, the collective bargaining, if we can't come to agreement, is binding arbitration. The disciplinary nature is one path that you can take is the third-party arbitrator for the disciplinary. It's uncharted territories. Since I've been chief, we've never gone that way.
So we don't know if the same
Well, again,
universe of people available as arbitrators are
we don't
available as-
decide who the, I'm sorry, sir.
Just wondering if the same people who are available as arbitrators are the same people who are available as hearing officers. Maybe Mr.
And
DePaul
But that
you
hearing
can appoint
officers-
anybody as a hearing officer.
The discussion here has been as if you're all assuming you'll pick a disinterested a qualified person who conducts hearings for a living, whether they're a hearing officer or an arbitrator, depending on the setting. But that's not, none of that is in the local law as it's drafted. This allows you to grab anybody from, down the hall, appoint them as the hearing officer, and go. If it was even just that it was a neutral, that it was a professional, that this is what they did for a living, that would go a long ways. Because I've seen Civil Service Law 75 also gives the municipality the right to pick the hearing officer.
Correct.
And I have seen that situation where it's not a neutral. It's someone from the command staff who is picked to be the hearing officer, and it's clear they don't have a clue what they're doing at a hearing. They don't know how to rule on objections relating to evidence. They know they've been put there to find this person guilty, and that's it. So even just qualifying this with a neutral, professional hearing officer would go a long ways.
Have you got proposed
That
language?
that puts two very subjective words into this local law.
Hearing officer.
So to me, that's very problematic.
I'll just repeat briefly that really the purpose of the proposed local law is to bring us in compliance with the Court of Appeals decision in Wallkill, which dictates that the decision-making for police disciplinary matters resides with the town board and must reside with the town board and cannot be bargained away. And so I would caution you to put words in there that would limit or restrict that important duty that you bear as town board members.
The question is not to put language in, Ken, is that what you're saying?
I would say do not put language in that is going to restrict your ability to...
or that's going to create, ambiguity with the words that I just heard.
You need to have the authority to embark upon the course of action that you think is correct for police disciplinary matters. It is a matter that is dictated by state law, not of our making, interpreted by the highest court in this state to be a responsibility and duty of the town board.
And with full knowledge that the likely outcome is not to change the way these matters have been handled, because those procedures remain in place for the agreed upon settlement.
Changing something about the selection of the hearing officer, I think, would be a
I do too.
problem.
I do too.
Changing the minimum amount of notice that the hearing officer must give someone for a hearing, I do not think would be a problem. If you want to do that.
Yeah.
Ken, if the officer is still aggrieved about the result of the hearing officer's report and in our decision, does the officer have any further recourse beyond that?
Yes, I think I mentioned that they could take it to a Supreme Court judge through an Article 78 proceeding. I didn't say Article 78 before,
But that would be the procedure.
you and I know what we're talking about. No, it's a
That's why I
procedure
was
under
tossing
the
it.
civil practice laws and rules to allow the officer to take it to a Supreme Court judge and grieve the decision.
Is it reviewable? Is it reviewable on an arbitrary and capricious standard, or is there a different standard of review on that Article 78?
I do not know.
I believe, because it would be after a hearing at which evidence is held, it would be substantial evidence.
Yeah, it'd be my
I think
guess.
boils down to the same,
Okay.
it's the same thing.
It's substantial evidence, you see?
Substantial, which is, the test is irrational, which is the same thing for arbitrary and capricious. So it's, I think it's 6 and 1 1/2 dozen the answer.
Well, I'm not sure that the substantial evidence is the same as arbitrary and capricious, but
Sounds less so.
Does anybody ever agree when?
One other question also regarding, and it just escaped me, it'll come back.
Well, Mr. Gordon, you made mention that after this Court of Appeals decision that it's the town's duty that they have to do this. And again, in my research of the 1,600 municipalities in the town or in the state of New York that this would affect, do you know how many have adopted these Town Law 155?
Brighton is often in this state a leader among towns.
I will just read from the decision itself. I have the decision here. And the decision concludes with this statement, and I quote, "Accordingly, the subject of police discipline resides with the town board and is a prohibited subject of collective bargaining between the town and the Wallkill PBA." That is the language of the Court of Appeals, unanimously held. So yes, that is what the courts, whether 3 or 300 municipalities have acted upon that, that is the clearly settled state of the law in New York.
And I'm uncomfortable with the idea of having this obligation on the town board and having it be a totally open-ended process. To me, having a structure to it, such as being proposed here, is helpful to both sides, but to the officer as well, that knows this is the procedure that they're going to follow.
Well, in all due respect, we do have a procedure that we follow now under our collective bargaining that gives us the ability for binding arbitration.
I understand, but that the Court of Appeals has ruled.
I guess I'd put,
We could adopt the same procedure if we wished, but the question is, which is the better?
Yeah, I guess I put it this way, and maybe this will help. Maybe it won't, but maybe it will. I think we can all agree that just because a whole lot of people are doing something that's contrary to the law, doesn't it make it right for that one person or that one entity to do something that's contrary to the law? I think your members would agree with it. I think the chief would agree with it. I think the town board agrees with that. And so that's the concept here is there's a problem with the way we're doing things. We have a responsibility to fix it, and that's what we're trying to do.
So just to give a little historic perspective on that, the last negotiating session, our council, our labor council, has talked about Wallkill, has advised the board, at least the supervisor, on the provisions of Wallkill, and I have been pushing back to say that we don't want to engage in this discussion if we have a situation where, and we did have a situation where a member's actions were being reviewed, and it could be viewed as retaliatory against the member. So I talked to the supervisor and said that I didn't think that it was appropriate to discuss Wallkill at that time. And then to take it outside of the collective bargaining process, it's only been recent that the discussion of moving forward on Wallkill, but you have been advised of the provisions of Wallkill, Supervisor, since you first came into office.
Since
2000.
This was October 2012, certainly not long after that, I became aware of this decision.
And you know, as far as whether, you know, Greece was the first Monroe County agency to do this. As to what their motivation was, I spoke to now Sheriff Baxter. He was Chief Baxter. It was shortly after Wallkill that the Greece Town Board enacted the provisions as recommended to the town, and they pretty much mirror what the local proposed legislation you have tonight. That is the town of Greece. And I just tried to codify what we currently have with the numbers, but we can go to a 20-day for the initial and then the 10 days after that. I agree with the statement that you made. We do not have a disciplinary problem with the Brighton Police Department. In my opinion, we have the most professional police officers in not just in Monroe County, but in New York State. This is not the result of the actions or the egregious conduct and misconduct of police officers. It's a desire, and it's been an ongoing desire from this board to look at what the Court of Appeals had said and codify it at a time it's not being perceived as retaliatory, not a subject of the collective bargaining agreement. I reviewed the contract this afternoon. There is a general provision section of the contract that basically says if certain part of this contract is deemed to be illegal, the contract in its entirety stays whole. That provision that's deemed illegal is not. And that's, I think, what they're trying to address. But again, I don't want anybody that's watching at home, and sir, you asked me the question, this is not the result of something or a dramatic change. It's a codification of what the Court of Appeals said should happen and take it outside of the collective bargaining process.
And I absolutely agree with what the chief said. We don't have a disciplinary problem. We have an outstanding force. And I would also say, and I think years of history confirm this as well, we do not have, under this administration or my predecessor's administration, we do not engage in discipline for political or other sort of frivolous, inappropriate purposes. We, I think, both have shared for a lot of years a respect for the work that we each do. I know I have the highest respect for the work that all of you do. And I think that is the track record and the current reality of the fact that we are not looking at changing the rules for any pending disciplinary matter, that we are simply looking at this as the right time to implement the clear direction of the Court of Appeals. I would be receptive to an amendment that would change that last sentence of subsection 4, that particular 10-day time period, so that it would read no later than 20 days prior to, so, you know, that.
So your comments currently, Supervisor, are simply for the purpose of the public hearing
Correct.
record?
Correct.
Because the public hearing is still open.
Yes, it is.
We haven't even
No,
had
we
a
have
motion
not.
made, so
No,
we
we have
couldn't
not.
procedurally take that amendment at this time.
Yeah, and once we close the public hearing and take what action we've decided, I don't have a problem in making that extension so that at a bare minimum, there would be those at least 20 days after the 45 days, after the 10 days. And again, all of this only kicks in if summary discipline, which has a long history of being the most likely outcome, none of those 10s and 45s, only the first 10, the second 10, the 45, the third 10, the fourth 10, none of those kick in if, as has overwhelmingly been the case in the past, summary discipline has been the way to resolve it. And I think, again, that summary discipline does reflect the respect, the mutual respect that I referred to before. Are there any other comments, either from the BPPA or from members of the board? Hearing none, I declare this public hearing closed. And the board may, if it chooses, take action, or may, if it chooses, propose an amendment, or may, if it chooses, not take action. But I would entertain motion.
So with respect to the local law adopting the Wallkill law,
The proposed police disciplinary procedures local law
yes,
of 2018.
I move that we adopt the local law as drafted by the attorney to the town with the amendment to section 127-4, final sentence, that shall read, "Notice of the date, time, and location of the hearing shall be hand-delivered or sent by certified mail to the address of the sworn officer named in the charges no later than 20 days prior to the date of the scheduled hearing."
Second.
And that would be the local law, the resolution in the form. Yeah.
Although,
If I could suggest, Councilmember DePonzio, that the motion be slightly amended to read that you would propose the adoption of the resolution before you with the addition of amending that last sentence.
Ken,
as you
did
stated.
the only thing is
Ken, did that resolution, that hard copy that was circulated?
the reason for my motion
was-
not adopting the resolution as prepared is I see the local law, I don't see a resolution. I have the resolution setting the public hearing date, dated September 26th.
It was
It was separately
sent out in
it
a
was separately
subsequent packet. There was a
sent out.
corrected packet that
I
was
wanted
sent out.
to make sure
Okay.
you were referencing that, yes.
Okay, then I would adopt the resolution as prepared by the attorney to the town with the amendment to section 127-4 to provide for the 20-day,
In the last sentence.
the last sentence, yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion.
And I also note, in answer to my question regarding the appeal process, that also is specified in the statute, that upon a 30-day notice, the officer can request a proceeding be commenced in New York State Supreme Court
Correct.
for a further review.
Under Article 78.
Under Article 78. I think this balances the interests, and I think it's incumbent upon us, for for the protection of the department, that there be a structure in place that we must abide by that gives them full protections and relief from the process. And in my 7 years on the board here, I think we've had discussion of discipline perhaps once. And it was very much a matter of discussion with the chief and relying upon his recommendations, and then ultimately an arbitrator or some other role that we got to report in further on the one circumstance in 7 years. And it was very much a mutual decision. But ultimately, I think it's got to fall to the town board. I do not want some independent body being responsible for our police discipline. We represent this community, but the chief of police carries great sway with us.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
I'd also just like to say that I appreciate the work of the Brighton Police Department. I appreciate the fact that we don't have a disciplinary problem, and I hope that that continues in the future. I understand where everybody's coming from, that years down the line, it may be all 5 new people sitting up here, it may be a new police chief, and you're just looking to have some sort of structure in place. But it's as fiscal stewards of the town, the buck stops with us. I would hate to see the issue litigated down the road. I'd rather see something concrete in place that complies with New York state law, and that's the reason I'm supporting it.
Well said.
Would absolutely concur. You have our unallied support.
Hearing no further comments, Deanne, please call the roll.
Councilmember DePonzio.
Aye.
Councilmember Werner.
Aye.
Councilmember Wilt.
Aye.
Supervisor Manley.
Again, with the highest respect for all of you and all the members of the BPPA and the police department that are not here, you do great work. I vote aye. Next we have, and thank you all for coming in tonight. You as well, Mr. Farish. Next, we have a public hearing on the proposed special events local law. We are going to hold this public hearing tonight. We are also going to ask at the end of this public hearing this evening, I'm going to ask that you set an additional public hearing date on this matter for November 28th. And I hereby declare this public hearing to be open. This is a matter that I requested, and it really ties in to the presentation we had already tonight to our small business owners. You have my correspondence in front of you, but a little bit of it is history. This special events local law was adopted in 1995 because the Ryder Cup was being held in 1995. We expected an influx of business. We didn't want them all shopping in Pittsford. We knew we had great opportunities for shopping here. So the town passed this law, and it gave the town the opportunity to set a time period, not longer than 2 weeks each year, during which various of our town code provisions would be relaxed to give a special time period that businesses could go all out in support of their retail activities. And we had some businesses, it goes to the staying power of some of our great businesses, because some of the promotions I remember, Tuthill Lighting, I remember Bruce Bellwood out there with his searchlight. That's the kind of thing. The Otter Lodge was out grilling burgers on a grill outside. There were other merchants with sort of sidewalk sale type activities, all permitted based on this special events period. In collaboration with the school district and the Chamber of Commerce, and in looking for a way to celebrate community, we looked at the fact that our school district is such an important part of our community identity, and decided that we would bring homecoming out to the public. Instead of making it a purely school event, the town, the chamber, and the Brighton Central School District collaborated for 20 years or so now on a homecoming event that involves a parade through the 12 corners, floats that the public gets to enjoy, and of course, a great football game. And we've had other activities right in the 12 corners, music, businesses, community groups, all engaged right there. Over time, the business element of the special events law really has become less relevant. We've had fewer, and in fact, I think it's fair to say, probably no businesses in recent years have actually taken advantage of this 2-week period. And I think that's because, and I've had this conversation with the Chamber of Commerce, with their board. I sit as an ex officio member of the Chamber board, as does Jason. The time period that is really of critical importance to our retailers is the holiday season. We've already talked about Small Business Saturday. Small Business Saturday kicks off the holiday retail season for small business owners like our businesses here in Brighton. And it's my goal with this proposed local law to promote economic activity in the town of Brighton by using Small Business Saturday as a kickoff to this special events period, to relax various of the provisions relating to code enforcement through the holiday season. And that's what would happen through this law. It would no longer require businesses or the chamber to come to the town and ask for a special events period, although they could. If, for example, in next year, the senior PGA is coming to Rochester, I don't anticipate, but if the Chamber of Commerce were to come to us and say, we'd really like you to do a 2-week special event period coinciding with the senior PGA, I think we'd give that serious consideration. But what this would allow our businesses to do is plan for the holiday season, start the celebration as we already do with Small Business Saturday, and the Chamber of Commerce does a great job in kicking that celebration off. But this would continue the period and give businesses the opportunity to do a little bit more during a slightly longer period to promote activity when they are up against it, and when they're up against big box stores in other communities, when they're up against major online retailing. This is an effort to limit the playing field, to level the playing field for a limited but very important period of time. So that is why I'm proposing that we make this change to the special events law. And really what it does, it doesn't change the substance of what is allowed or where it is allowed. These changes are allowed only in the same commercial zoning districts currently identified, and the specific activities that are allowed are the same as they are now allowed. It would just be during that different time period, the Saturday after Thanksgiving through December 31st. So, 31st.
And Bill, the hearing is
So
open,
let me just, the public hearing is open, and what I would like to do first is ask if there's anyone here that would like to address this proposed law. Judy.
Judy Schwartz, 179 Ashbourne Road. I haven't read it, must admit, but I have a concern that I don't want the town to get to look tacky. I don't know if there are a limited number of, let's say, A-frames or sandwich board, whatever kind of signs you want to call them, out in front of a business. We have people do it now all the time, and sometimes it's more than one. They're sometimes in the line of sight where you can't see when you're driving. So it's a very long period of time as far as I'm concerned. Will there be really, and I'm serious, enforcement during it? Because if a lot of people do it and the businesses are close together and we can't see safely when we're driving, especially, we're not talking so much about a plaza, but the individual businesses, if they put things out near the road and you do go in, sometimes you can't see when you go to pull out. So I'm concerned about that element. I also think that there should be a limit on the number of signs and whatever you want to call it that a business does. I worry about how we're going to look. It's a long time to have things up and out. It's a season when things could get windy and so on. They could get blown away, torn, or whatever, and we won't look nice. I mean, I'm really very concerned about that because I just want us to look nice and not tacky. So I just wonder whether there will be a limit as to the number of signs, the kind of signs, and so on that one particular business can have at a given time, and the enforcement of it, placement of the signs and so on, and whatever decorations and whatever they put up.
This law itself does not change any of the permitted or prohibited activities under the current special events law. What I will tell you, though, is we've heard the concern. We've actually had discussions in our Public Works Committee about A-frame signs because they have proliferated and other similar types of signage. They have, it does seem to a certain extent proliferated, and we have done some benchmarking. We've looked at what some other communities have done. We're still discussing that in Public Works. To the extent that we do make changes, those changes, we would want to make sure that, that we address, as they would relate to this special events law. But for now, this special events law only changes the time of the special events period.
Right. But how does a business person know that, oh, gee, it's 5 weeks instead of 2? I can put out, a ton of stuff.
I think the answer to that would be, and it would be my hope and expectation that we would collaborate with the Chamber of Commerce or, with other groups of businesses to sort of communicate, certainly to communicate what is allowed, and also, to discuss other kinds of promotions, because we also worry that our commercial corridors, there's several ways our commercial corridors, frankly, can look badly. One way I agree is if you have all sorts of, every person's idea of what is tacky is different, but certainly there are things we all know that detract. But another thing that detracts, quite frankly, is businesses that are closed because they couldn't compete with the way of the world. And legend has it that Black Friday is called Black Friday because that's the day that the average retailer goes into the black for the year. And they make all their money in the period between basically Thanksgiving and Christmas. So I don't know if that's true or not, but we've probably all heard that story. So we know that this is an important time of year for retailers. We want people, not only Brighton residents, we want people to come to Brighton to shop. We saw 2 great retailers here tonight, and there are many, many more. And we want them to be able to tell their story. And we want people to come to Brighton and shop at Whiter's Hardware, and I mentioned Tut Hill, and eat at some of the great restaurants. All of those things, and they go hand in glove. When someone who shops at Whiter Hardware may have lunch at any of the restaurants in the 12 Corners, Core Life.
The other thing that you said, to me, 5 weeks is a very long period of time. How will it be enforced when we get into January and things are still up? Are you really going to be strict about getting it cleaned up afterwards? I mean,
that's a fair question, and I think it's important.
Yeah. I will be honest with you. I patronize shops that look nice, that look lovely, that care enough to make our town look nice. And I let them know it. And I thank them very much. And I think that's a really important thing. If a business doesn't care how they look, why should I go in? Personally, I mean, this is tough, but why should I patronize them if they don't care to make my town look nice,
And I agree, and the chamber promotes that with an award, a beautification-based award, and they have given it to businesses both along Monroe Avenue, but also over on West Henrietta Road, ranging everything from the Harley Davidson store over there, which did a great job. They moved out of that old ugly cinder block building into a much nicer new building, Jay's Diner over there, Charbroil here, the great facade they put on, and others. So yeah, there's no question. We all want to see, we all want to find. That's one of the beautification committee as they soon begin their work. I think we take a holistic approach towards that and are looking to identify ways to further encourage businesses to look their best, because you're right, just like there's a whole cottage industry now of people making houses for sale look their best, their curb appeal. That's how they sell.
That's right.
Same thing for a business.
Okay.
We do want businesses to look good, but again, we also want them to do enough business that they can afford to look good, that they can.
Oh, yeah, I'm not saying they have to spend a fortune. Sometimes less is more, Just keep it neat, don't paper your windows, maybe put a flower pot out in front. I'm not saying go all out by any means, no. I just think that if they care, then we should honor them and let them know that too, so.
Thanks. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address in the audience this local law? How about any board members?
Bill, my only comment, I share Judy's concerns, but let's give it a shot and see if it helps the businesses, and if it gets out of control, then we can change it. But Saturday after Thanksgiving through the New Year's Eve, I guess I would extend it an extra day on either end. If Black Friday is the big day for people to go out, and I appreciate Small Business Saturday is the designation, but that's when people are out shopping on that Friday as well. What's
Yeah.
the thinking not to extend it through the holiday on both ends? Most people are off on Friday.
I think the Small Business Saturday really is because the chamber has in recent years, and I know will again this year, hold a kickoff event. And it would be my expectation that this time period keys into that celebration. And it makes sense to have the celebration on the first day, not the second day. I hear what you're saying, but that's the day that local businesses, really are recognizing as a day they want to make their own. And
Yes, in my mind, I'd leave it to them to make that decision collectively. It's better to have a kickoff event, and by all means, but that we can leave it to them and allow it on Friday, allow it on New Year's Day, if they think it suits their business. My thinking.
A soft launch. That's a soft voice. In retail parlance, a soft opening is what I meant to say.
Right, but at the same time, you want to open with some splash. Their goal, and it's one that I support because our small businesses are the heart and soul. You go up and down the avenue, we have those businesses, and some of them are service-based, some of them are restaurants, some of them are retail, but all of them, one of the great advantages is having so many customers right in their backyard. We want to make it easy for them to promote, but not just to their customers in their backyard, but we know people are going to be out shopping on Small Business Saturday. Frankly, we know on Black Friday, people are much more, today, and malls are changing, everything's changing. This is the time period that seemed to make sense in conversations with the chamber, and I think we ought to, look at that. Whether we go to January 1st or December 31st probably doesn't matter a lot.
Back in.
Yeah. But I think kicking it off on Small Business Saturday ties into the ongoing chamber promotion.
Understand your thinking?
Yeah, I think this just gives us a pretext to highlight to our community, our local businesses, and again, I think Small Business Saturday would be a great day to kick it off, just because that is already a recognized event. But the goal, I think, is to incorporate the community, and the
residential community and the business community.
Exactly. So.
Sure.
Are there any other comments?
And like we said before, is if it proves to be a problem, we'll have it back to the drawing board. If it proves to be too restrictive and we want to maybe extend it to include Black Friday or to include New Year's Day,
we can do that.
We can do that. Sure. Get feedback from the businesses.
Yep.
Well, we're going to revisit this on the 28th?
Then again, I would ask, if there are no further comments at this time, I'm going to declare the public hearing closed, and I will ask, and I'll give this to you, Jason, as a Chamber of Commerce board member, if you would make the motion to set the second public hearing on this matter.
Yes, I move that we set the additional public hearing date for November 28th, 2018 for proposed 2018 amendments to special events local law. I move we adopt the resolutions prepared by the attorney to the town.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. Dan, please call the roll.
Councilmember DePonte?
Aye.
Councilmember Werner?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilt?
Aye.
Supervisor Maley?
Aye. Thank you. Public hearings are concluded for the night. Thank you for taking the transcript of that. We appreciate it. We'll move on to communications. Can I have a motion to receive and file the communications this evening?
So moved.
Second.
We have two items of communication. The first is correspondence from Chief Henderson concerning the performance of duty disability retirement of Officer Jeffrey Hoffman. And attachments to that, we also have correspondence from the state DOT that I was copied in on to a resident who wrote concerning West Henrietta Road and Crittenden Road. And that's been an intersection that has been in our attention. We had a meeting just a couple weeks ago with Kevin Bush, the regional director of this region of the state DOT. That was one of the intersections we highlighted. We have in recent years used Community Development Block Grant to extend sidewalks along Crittenden Road, but because the state controls that intersection and the state mandates a full, as understandably so, level of ADA compliance and crosswalk signalization and everything else, completing that intersection itself is an expensive proposition. We're on record with the DOT urging them to do that. We heard some things in a meeting that give us at least some hope that they really are looking at West Henrietta Road, and not tomorrow, not even the day after tomorrow, not next year, but that they are doing some serious examination of West Henrietta Road. And that does give us hope that there may be some changes and improvements. And if that happens, we know that some of these pedestrian improvements will be made. So this is that letter, both a letter to the DOT as well as their response. So we have a motion and a second. Any comments on either of those items? Hearing none, Dan, please call the roll.
Councilmember DePonzio?
Aye.
Councilmember Werner?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilt?
Aye.
Supervisor Mealy?
Aye. Committee reports. Community Services Committee. Robin?
Thanks, Bill. The Community Services Committee has not met in any intervening time frame since our last board meeting. Our next meeting will be next Wednesday, November 21st at 9:30 a.m. at the Brookside School, 220 Idlewood Road. As always, members of the public are welcome to attend.
Thank you. Finance. Jason?
Yes, Bill, the Finance and Administrative Services Committee met last Tuesday, November 6th. Each of the items that were reviewed in committee will appear on tonight's agenda to be discussed in further detail. And in addition, we had a community member come and join us. A welcome change. We were able to discuss various questions.
Yeah, we had some good discussion.
Yes,
Thank you, Judy.
Yes, various topics that were raised that we were able to discuss in committee. And also, we continued our review of the 2019 FASC meeting schedule. So there was a potential conflict identified for February 19th, since that's the same week generally as the Association of Towns Conference. So we'll stay tuned on that week. But our next regularly scheduled meeting will be on Tuesday, November 20th. We meet at 3:30 in the afternoon in the Stage Conference Room here at Town Hall, and the public is invited to attend.
Thanks, Jason. Public Safety.
Public Safety, I chaired it in the absence of Council Member Vogel, which is again very sad. But as Vice Chair, I chaired the meeting. The various providers were there. Brighton Ambulance reported that they have seen a continued increase in the number of their calls, 541 for the past month, for a total of 5,149 calls. They yet have not been able to identify what the cause of those increased number of calls were, but they're continuing to look at it. The big news, though, for Brighton Ambulance is the grand opening on November 19th of their new facility at 11 o'clock, I believe. And we're all looking forward to that, and the public is very much...
Actually, I'm not. They have traffic and space concerns there, so they will be conducting public tours at future times, but actually they're not...
So simply the ribbon cutting will be on the 19th, excuse me. The public is invited to come at another time to take a look. They did notice...
They're running shuttle, I mean, even with that limited group, they're running shuttles to get people there, yeah.
One thing of some concern is the difficulty in staffing the BVA corps there. And I think it's simply a reflection of our high employment generally around the country, for that matter. But so they got an active outreach program, also trying to broaden their reach for diversity candidates and so forth.
I've had some further communication with them, and we'll be sharing with them our various minority and other disadvantaged organizations and media outlets that we use in our own employment outreach. Because I do believe they, like us, they want to, reach out as broadly as they can to get the best qualified and as many people as possible and broaden their diversity.
So the community is encouraged to consider an ambulance and EMT career. A new ambulance is on order and on track. There was some concern about an available chassis or not, but but the manufacturer has indicated they're going to make arrangements for a loaner on the mid-November here, so that we will not go without a unit. The fire department indicated that they're having approximately 7 calls a day, total calls 2,184. And the Department of Public Works reported through Commissioner Guyon that the GIGP project on Monroe Avenue is now complete.
That's wrapping up. We should finish it up this week, honestly.
Okay, wrapping up
Small
this
stuff
week.
left.
That the leaf crews are active and they're out there, and hopefully the snow will hold back while we get the leaves cleared. Commissioner Guyon also reported on that they are working on an Edgewood sidewalk analysis. There's been some requests that there be an extension of the sidewalk up to Monroe Avenue, and he's looking at the potential costs for that. Similarly, there was a request that we look at extending the East Avenue sidewalk to link with the Town of Pittsburgh project that's anticipated next year, and the cost looks quite prohibitive for that small extension, because it would require the removal of a high bank, a retaining wall, and some beautiful mature trees. But we're still looking at that and all options, because making linkages for the school at Allen's Creek is very important to everyone. Let's see, the matter of Torrington Drive and speed concerns and cut-through traffic through there is been given a lot of attention by the police department. And it's shocking how much traffic there is on those streets, and the greatest volume going from Monroe through to Elmwood. On a 10-day period, the department reported some 33,431 cars just on Torrington alone.
That was Brookline.
That was actually Brookline.
Brookline.
Torrington was
32,000 on Torrington, 33,000 on Brookline.
I've got them backwards, excuse me. But still.
Both are heavy.
3,000
For a
vehicles.
residential street.
Per day on those small streets. It does put a burden on them, and the police are looking at different traffic calming actions on their part, and it seems to have some impact.
Council member, if I may just for a moment, that is my neighborhood. And these are our friends and neighbors who are making up that. This isn't people, for the most, I'm sure there are some, but largely, as I sit waiting to turn off of Orchard onto Monroe to come in here or go wherever, I see people coming from Brookline, from Roosevelt, from Upper Meadow and such. They come out of there and then turn down these streets to get to go to 590. So when we talk about people trying to concern about speed and whatnot, these are residents who are doing this for, I got to imagine the majority, and we just need to make sure that we're all very cognizant when we're traveling through other people's neighborhoods that we were traveling as if we would be driving through our own.
That's a very good point, Dan. And another thing to consider perhaps is not take the cut through and go down to Elmwood and just make the turn. But there was a discussion also of the status of the East Avenue striping. The restriping has occurred through the State Department of Transportation in anticipation of the final asphalt coating there, and it's causing some difficulty, but hopefully when the project is actually done and working, that will be alleviated somewhat.
Mike, have you had any further conversation with Kevin Bush?
I've reached out to the EIC, the engineer in charge out there. I have not got an answer back, so I'll have some answers for you tomorrow.
Yeah, let's continue to follow up with them tomorrow because, I mean, the project won't really be finished until sometime next year after the senior PGA tournament. And in the meantime, we want to make sure, particularly at the transition points, that when, you know, at the Pittsford end, when it goes from the 4 to the 3, that it's well signed and striped, and that at the significant intersections, you know, frankly, they do themselves a disservice if at this stage they don't carry it out well, because people's ill will carry over to next year. And this is an important project. It has the potential to make East Avenue, maybe not perfect, I think we all agree we would have liked to see some additional changes, but an improved multimodal thoroughfare. But if they blow it now, you know, first impressions.
I'll hear you. I'll get back to you guys. I'll get some information and get back to you on that.
Thanks, Mike. Also, we had a resident request some consideration of a crosswalk or crossing guard across French Road from the Chateau Square and French Creek Apartments, and just the difficulty in getting the children across the street to French Road School. There is a sidewalk extension that might be considered, and Commissioner Guyan has indicated that he might be able to look into a CDBG grant for that sidewalk extension. But it raised the issue of, again, any number of sidewalk extensions. As the town becomes more walkable and we put in more trails and more sidewalks, people are using them. And we do want to connect all that we can within a very limited budget.
And I think particularly we certainly want to focus on sidewalk connections near schools.
Yes.
It's one of our real priorities. You know, take a look. You know, we've done our bicycle pedestrian master plan. We identified a number of gaps in the system, and I think that committee may be a good vehicle for making some prioritizations. You know, looking at parameters like, is it close to a school? What are the populations that are likely to be using that you know, particular stretch of sidewalk? And so, but that's where we're going as a community. Those connections are important.
Very much on our mind. Also, we had some discussion of the property on West Henrietta Road and the address I am searching for, but
then that's something we'll be following up on.
Also, at my request, I asked for the chief to report on opioid overdoses and deaths, because it came to my mind to check on the county website, and I was very distressed to see that we had reported on the map one fatality in Brighton, and the chief indicated that we've got it's worse than that. Chief?
It is worse than that. Within the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks, we've had a total of 3 overdose deaths. And as you indicated, you looked at the map, and the fatalities seem to be increasing. The number of overdoses seem to be increasing. And I reported to you and the rest of the members of the board a concern that has hit our region, and that is cocaine that is laced with fentanyl. And we believe that this is driving some of those opioid overdoses, the deaths. And traditionally, powdered cocaine is not an area that contained fentanyl, but our region is seeing that. So the messages are getting out about this concern. The approaches that we take with our overdose death is we treat them as criminal acts. We devote investigative resources towards trying to find sources, working with the district attorney's office. We're part of the Monroe County Heroin Task Force, which is part of a Greater Rochester Narcotics Enforcement Team. But every one of those deaths in this community represented a family member, and the staff that you saw here tonight are the staff that deal with those that are dealing with tragedy in their lives, and we're doing our best to try to prevent further tragedies.
It's just shocking, and what we saw as heroin addicted people and their difficulties 40 years ago, we're now seeing a much different situation, and it's largely attributable, from what I hear and read, to fentanyl. It's a reality that these drugs are now mixed with this poison. It does give you a better high, apparently, but you're taking your life in your hands. And my sympathies go out to all the families that are dealing with this addiction. But as the chief said, please understand that it's now being mixed with cocaine as well, and that Brighton is not exempt from this problem. And to have 3 deaths in just such a short period of time is just a tragedy.
We did discuss treatment facilities and treatment options, and both in our community and in Brighton and beyond. And the one thing that's clear is the need for treatment facilities of various kinds for different ages is very real. And if we're going to address this crisis that affects our communities in so many different ways, part of it, a big part of it, is going to be to have sufficient treatment facilities available for people who want treatment.
And our 3 deaths are only part of the 117 deaths that I saw reported in the month of October.
In Monroe
in
County.
Monroe County. That is just a shocking number. And then the last item that we discussed is my proposal that we add an amendment to our town code that would require safe gun storage in town. That if there is a gun in a residence, it is to be in a locked container, in my mind, or equipped with a safety device, either a cable lock or a trigger lock that would make them inoperable. The statistics, again, are very troubling. We had hoped that the state would be acting. I'm amazed that Massachusetts is the only state in the nation that has a restriction on gun storage of this broad a nature. That in residence, the guns must be in a locked container or have a safety device installed, or otherwise be on the person of the individual or within an area of control, which is largely within arm's length. The statistics indicate from my research that the homes with children, 1/3 of them have guns. That 78 children are killed or injured each day in the United States, 12 of them fatally, each day. That parents report that children never handle the guns, but yet when they interview the children, 22% indicate that no, they do handle the guns. That a 3-year-old can operate a weapon, can pull the trigger. And that youth suicides in Massachusetts, only 9% are attributable to guns, to firearms, whereas 39% nationwide of youth suicides are attributable to guns elsewhere. So just this restriction on storage has a significant impact. The focus of this change would be the protection of children, first of all. But second of all, 500,000 firearms per year are reported lost or stolen. And so that's an indication that these guns are not being well restricted. And so council has agreed to assist in the design of this statute. I've had discussions with the chief and the supervisor and my colleagues. And I'd like to see us implement this as soon as possible, A question has arisen, well, what are you going to do for enforcement? Well, this is not the sort of thing that we're going to be entering people's homes to check on their weapons. At the same time, like so many offenses, they are enforced, or statutes, they're enforced in the breach. If a gun is found outside the owner's control, there's going to be some questions to answer. How were they being protected? I see it as a problem, and we've just seen too many tragedies. Would it have stopped the Pittsburgh Tree of Life massacre or the Thousand Oaks murders? No, those were guns that were legally held by those people. But this is one thing we can do to protect our community. So that was discussed at length as well. Next meeting of the Public Safety Committee will be, will be on December 11th at 8 o'clock in the morning, typically in the downstairs meeting room.
Thanks, Chris. Keep going with Public Works.
Okay. Wearing two hats. Public Works met on November the 6th at 9 o'clock. A resident asked that we consider installing sidewalks along the southwest side of East Avenue along the Pittsburgh Town Line to Knollwood, which I mentioned previously, which we also discussed at Public Safety as well. And we're looking at the different options available there and the potential costs, but we are quite concerned at the expense of linking to the Pittsburgh project that's coming next year. For the retrofit, the Operations Center LED lights, the project will be presented to FAST, request that that we authorize the bidding. And has it been considered yet at FAST, or has that been let to bid?
I'm sorry, which bidding, Chris?
The LED retrofit at the operations?
That'll be presented to FASC on the 20th.
On the 20th upcoming?
Not this meeting, but the next meeting, right. Next week.
We also discussed the buildings which are along the riverside of East River Road. There's a number of buildings that are in very poor repair, and the town staff will be in contact with the new owner of those property to discuss the conditions of these buildings and then to report back to the committee. The town staff will request that FASC recommend that the town board authorize the preparation of an RFQ to hire a consultant to review and validate the climate action plan and the current draft climate action plan that's before the Sustainability Committee, and to develop a public outreach plan and then implement the plan. The matter was brought to our attention by a resident regarding existing railing and fence posts which are deteriorated at Monroe Avenue and the Glen Ellen Road entrance. And the committee agreed that the best treatment would be the immediate removal of those railings and fence posts and restore the area. Then we will pursue possibly GIGP funding or otherwise to do some sort of improvement to mark that entryway. Similarly, the Lockdeville wood railings were discussed. Several sections of that wood railing along the Lockdeville Pond are severely deteriorated, and the staff suggested removing the damaged portions of the railing, and the committee agreed that that seemed to be appropriate. Then there are quite a number, looks like about a dozen trees that were discussed, many of which are greater than 30 inches and will require a public hearing, and those were all looked at. Then we updated the status of the farmers market bid results, and we're very pleased to have gotten a low bid of $177,800, and it looks like we're going to be able to proceed with some improvements out there.
And with some alternates to that.
Within the budget we've got.
Yep.
That's terrific. That first step is going to be very exciting. The Blossom Road sanitary sewer improvement has been completed with the exception of testing the sewer, but that's a valve that was put in, and there wasn't that much disruption.
Not much. Went very smooth.
Worked out very well. Yep. And then we discussed the East Avenue roadway improvements as well. Then Highland Crossing Trail, the consultant is preparing the bid documents, and they'll be available for contracts by late November or early December. That's Commissioner Guyon's project that he's worked very hard, and it's going to make a big improvement.
It's been going on for a while.
All right, and so our next meeting will be December 4th at 9:00 a.m.
Thank you, Chris. New business. Jason, reading and approval of claims.
Yes, Bill, earlier this evening, I reviewed claims totaling $572,288.63. Notable claims include to Maynard's Electric in the amount of $4,945 for the purchase of LED lights and related supplies for replacement of older bulbs in the town hall. Also to Saxby Implement Corporation for the purchase of a zero-turn mower in the amount of $16,364.76. To Van Bortle Ford for the purchase of a Ford F-350 dump truck in the amount of $43,414.15. To Barton and Lojudas in the amount of $23,232.95 for professional services for the comprehensive plan update, and that was partially grant funded. And finally, to the Brighton Central School District in the amount of $37,961.59 for pool rental for 2018-2019 for use of open swim and recreation programs. And we pay it in advance based on a per-hour cost, amortizing the 20-year debt service that they pay for that pool, plus actual costs from the previous year. And then we're given a credit as an adjustment for what we overpaid last year. Well, this year we got a credit. I imagine in some years we might have to make up the difference if we were undercharged. But the claims all appear to be in order, and I move that they be approved.
Second.
Any discussion on any of those? Hearing none, Dan, please call the roll.
Councilmember DePoncio?
Aye.
Councilmember Werner?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilt?
Aye.
Supervisor Maley?
Aye, I will note you mentioned the LED lights. I came into Town Hall on Saturday, and there was Gary Donofrio on Saturday, getting it done with the minimum of disruption, installing LED lights. And, you know, I asked Gary, so in this particular room, which ones are LED and which ones aren't? Couldn't tell the difference. No, not in this room.
Oh,
But
okay.
in another room. Lights next to each other, couldn't
tell the difference.
with the, you know, the plastic, couldn't tell. There was no real material difference in the color or the intensity of
So
the LED.
large parts of the building, Gary will be able to,
Yeah, Gary was putting a whole bunch of them in over the
There's
weekend.
been quite a few that have been changed out already.
He's doing it, you know, as much as he can on the weekend to avoid disrupting ongoing business.
Gary's
Like on the claim that there were about over 600 bulbs.
He had a whole bunch of them on his cart. He didn't have 600, but he had a whole bunch of them. Okay, Chris.
Next item, as I indicated, is for public hearing for proposed tree removals. That's to be set for December 12th. The trees are at 44 Model Lane, 1 Tyburn Way on Stratton, 81 and 91 Penfield Road, 205 Dunroven Lane, 218 Mayflower Drive, and 87 North Regis Drive. I move that we adopt the resolution before us to set that public hearing.
Second.
And there are actually more to follow.
Quite a few more.
Yeah. But this will be, 7 different properties. So we have that motion, the second. Further discussion? Hearing none. Dan, please call the roll.
Councilmember DePoncio?
Aye.
Councilmember Werner?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilt?
Aye.
Supervisor Maley?
Aye. Robin.
The next matter seeks to authorize the supervisor to execute a contract with McCord Landscape Architecture, PLLC, in an amount not to exceed $1,500 for landscape design of the Town of Brighton campus garden. I move on the resolution as prepared by the attorney to the town.
Second.
This is what has been the Rose Garden over at the corner of Seminole. We funded $7,500 last year towards really a reboot, if you will, of that garden, and we're going to, under this bid proposal anticipates spending about $1,500 with McCord Landscape Architects to design that garden. So more to follow when the weather warms up.
Right.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none. Dan, please call the roll.
Councilmember DePonzio?
Aye.
Councilmember Werner?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilt?
Aye.
Supervisor Mealy?
Aye. Chris?
Next is to authorize the supervisor to execute a contract with Foundation Design PC for geotechnical services related to the Washington Drive Drainage Project in an amount not to exceed $3,800. I move that we adopt the resolution before us.
Second.
This is a project that Mike has discussed with us at the very end of Washington Drive to try to address some drainage issues over there.
And erosion control.
And erosion, yeah.
This is the steep embankment there, and
Correct, correct. The water currently gets discharged over the steep embankment. We're trying to design dry wells. I just want to make sure there's not going to be any detrimental effects with that.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Dan, please call the roll.
Councilmember DePonzio?
Aye.
Councilmember Werner?
aye.
Councilmember Wilt?
Aye.
Supervisor Mealy?
Aye. Why don't you do the next one too, Chris?
Next is for authorization to solicit a request for professional qualification, or RFQ, statement to be used to select on-site training for one-person plowing. I move that we adopt the resolution before us.
Second.
Self-explanatory.
Well, it's just to, well, there was a day when our plows had two operators on them.
Yep. And then now it's all of our new vehicles are one-person plow. We want to make sure that as many of our people as possible are trained and really fully trained.
That there's going to be some refreshment of the training.
Yes, we'll have, some folks aren't certified at one-person plowing. Those will be certified at one-person plowing, and the rest are just a refresher course. And also, to help folks, there's going to be insight into new plowing techniques and things of that nature. So it's real informative for the drivers. I think it'll be helpful.
Great.
So probably a de minimis change, but it looks like the resolution says request for quotations instead of request for qualifications.
Qualifications.
Qualifications,
correct.
okay, so it should
Thanks, Jason.
Make that as a
Make that friendly amendment, please.
accept the friendly
Good.
amendment.
All right, we have that motion and second as amended by the maker and seconder. Dan, please call the roll.
Seconder.
Councilmember DePonzio?
Aye.
Councilmember Werner?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilt?
Aye.
Supervisor Mealy?
Aye. Jason?
Yes, the next matter seeks to authorize a budget transfer in the amount of $600 from the Parks Department Corbett's Glen Maintenance Supplies account to the Corbett's Glen Maintenance Equipment account for needed equipment. I move we adopt the resolution as prepared by the attorney to the town.
Second.
Dan, please call the roll.
Councilmember DePonzio?
Aye.
Councilmember Werner?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilt?
Aye.
Supervisor Mealy?
Aye. And the next one too, Jason.
Yes, the next matter seeks to authorize a budget transfer in the amount of $1,500 from Parks Department Corbett's Glen Trail Maintenance Supplies account to the Buckland Park Maintenance Supplies account, and the transfer of $1,200 from the Parks Department Frankel Park Trail Maintenance Supplies account to the Buckland Park Maintenance Repair Service account for unexpected facility repairs and supply purchases for Buckland Park. I move we adopt the resolution as prepared by the attorney to the town.
Second.
Any discussion on that? Hearing none. Dan, please call the roll.
Councilmember DePonzio?
Aye.
Councilmember Werner?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilt?
Aye.
Supervisor Mealy?
Aye. Robin?
The next matter seeks to accept donations from corporate and community sponsors for the 2018 July 4th celebration in an amount totaling $5,900. I move on the resolution as prepared by the attorney to the town.
Second.
And I just want to thank all of those great people. We have a very generous donation as we get every year from Wegmans, 5-star improvements. Our friend who passed away earlier this year, the late Harvey Nussbaum, had made a donation. More corporate real estate, Cornerstone Kitchens, Paris Kerwin Associates, Canandaigua National Bank, and Seeger and Shortino all made donations towards the 4th of July. Thank you, each one of you. You make a difference in our quality of life. That's a great day. We hope it'll be maybe not quite so hot next year. It's a terrible thing. You know, we always say in July, we're not going to complain about the heat. And here we are, and the snow is falling, and we're complaining about the heat. But it was really hot on the 4th of July this year. So something in the middle would be good. Dan, please call the roll on accepting.
Councilmember DeFonzio.
Aye.
Councilmember Werner.
Aye.
Councilmember Wilt.
Aye.
Supervisor Mealy.
Aye. Jason, why don't you do the next one?
Next matter seeks to authorize the supervisor to execute a contract with the Burke Group for actuarial services for a base fee of $4,000 and for an optional interim valuation report for fiscal year ending December 31, 2019, in an amount not exceeding $2,250. I move we adopt the resolution as prepared by the attorney to the town.
Second.
This resolution relates to what is sometimes known as OPEB, other post-employment benefits. And the reporting of those on our financial statements is governed by GASB, the Government Accounting Standards Board, 75, which is, they number their rulings and their guidance. And this supersedes a previous GASB statement and is requiring additional disclosure in financial statements of the potential liabilities generated by retiree health care costs. The reality is we do pay those on an annual basis. We will continue to pay those on an annual basis, so I'm not sure that at some level, yes, this reporting, which will report a very large number, does at some level reflect a liability, but there's no countervailing report of the our commitment on the other side. And we do make those payments every year. But the reality is we are now required by GASB to retain actuarial services to a higher degree than we have done in the past. We've used the Burke Group in the past, and it's our intention to use them again. Now, we have a motion and a second. Any further comment? Dan, please call the roll.
Councilmember DeFonzio.
Aye.
Councilmember Werner.
Aye.
Councilmember Wilt.
Aye.
Supervisor Mealy.
Aye. Chris?
Next item is to authorize the supervisor to accept a community development block grant, or CDBG, we've referred to it, funds totaling $63,750 for the Southland Drive Sanitary Improvement Project, and execute an agreement between the Monroe County and the town regarding the grant funding. I move that we adopt the resolution before us.
Second.
And this is, great. It'll enable us to do those sewer improvements over in West Brighton. We've, done a number of projects over the years relating to drainage. This is a sewer project, and we're always happy to have the opportunity to get this important work done. You don't always see it, but you see it if it fails, and we want to make sure that system doesn't fail. We have a motion and a second. Dan, please call the roll.
Councilmember DeFonzio.
Aye.
Councilmember Werner.
Aye.
Councilmember Wilt.
Aye.
Supervisor Mealy.
Aye. Jason?
Yes, the next matter seeks to authorize an amendment to the 2019 budget of the police department by transferring $1,800 from the forfeited property account to the expense account, law enforcement equipment, for the use of TransUnion TLOXP data search engines and database. I move we adopt the resolution as prepared by the attorney to the town.
Second.
I'm not going to begin to try to explain that TransUnion TLOXP data search engine, but
It's how you do
I know the
business in
chief
the
can.
future. And we need access to databases, and I've got approval to go out 5 years, and I'll amend them accordingly, but this gets us going.
And again, this is because we are able to use the proceeds of forfeited property. It has no net budget impact
neutral.
during those 5 years.
And this, this is supposed to be a 2019 budget amendment.
So the bid quotation, or from the company, said that they would start in December and bill us in 2019. I've learned over the years to project out instead of project in.
Thanks, Mark.
Wrote it up like you drafted it.
There you go.
We got that motion. It's been seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none. Dan, please call the roll.
Councilmember DeFonzio.
Aye.
Councilmember Werner.
Aye.
Councilmember Wilt.
Aye.
Supervisor Mealy.
Aye, and Jason, one last
The
one.
next matter seeks approval of an undertaking under Town Law, Section 25, for collection of property taxes. I move we adopt the resolution as prepared by the attorney to the town.
Second.
Dan, this is one we do every year, but state
Just
law
a
requirements.
procedural matter.
It's functionally similar to being bonded, so you can collect all those property tax
Yeah, a lot of
revenues.
checks come in with my name on them, so.
Everybody's got their price, Dan.
Thanks. Motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Councilmember DePonzio?
Aye.
Councilmember Werner?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilt?
Aye.
Supervisor Manning?
Aye. Matters of the supervisor, I do want to talk, this time of year, I was on Channel 13, came in to talk to me today. It was kind of funny, except it wasn't funny. The streets in Brighton were in great shape this morning, and sadly, I watched people sliding around through intersections and ramps in other jurisdictions. Quite frankly, I'm not quite sure why, but I do, want to send kudos to our highway department. They did a great job. It wasn't a heavy snow, but it wasn't it was a real snow. And the first snow of the year is always tough. They went out and they did it. But as I said to the TV reporter, this is a really tough time of year because first they took care of the snow and ice, and then they went right back out and started picking up leaves. So while I want to give them a pat on the back for the great work, as I said to the reporter this morning, I had an 8 o'clock meeting to start the day. Chamber of Commerce meeting, as a matter of fact. All of the people on the board from Brighton were there on time. All the people that don't live in Brighton were calling in. I'm going to be 15 minutes, half an hour late. Some didn't even show up at all. Again, we talk about it. It is true. Nobody plows their snow better than the town of Brighton. We saw it today. Nice job, Mike. I know you'll pass that on to your people. But also, again, they're picking up leaves. We say this every year. I know, Judy, you're going to be pleased to hear me saying this, but you're not pleased seeing all the people who aren't following what we ask them to do. Please, please, please do not, in fact, forget the please. Just don't. Do not put your leaves in the street. And Judy, you want to come up and say something?
For the first time, I noticed people who live on streets with a striped shoulder think that the place to put their leaves is in the street between that white line and the edge of their lawn. I couldn't believe the number of streets yesterday and the day before. It's incredible. So it's not for that.
It is not okay. It's not okay for all sorts of reasons. It is not safe for pedestrians and cyclists. But the rains we've had recently highlight another reason that it is not either legal or advised. It does impact drainage. In a lot of neighborhoods, you'll see water coming up driveways and then flooding sidewalks. One of the reasons that happens is because storm drains are either blocked or drainage into those drains is blocked by leaves. Do not leave your leaves in the street. I can't be any clearer for all of those reasons. And I think the problem is becoming worse, and we've talked, Mike, about enforcement action. The warning, we're through the early part of the season. I know a lot of people, myself included, were out doing leaves this weekend. Please don't put them in the street. I know people get concerned. People particularly get concerned when it snows. Today is a great example. The fact that it snows doesn't mean we're going to stop picking up leaves. We're going to pick up leaves until they're gone. Our bulk leaf crews are in their second cycle through the town. as they typically do. They're going to be working probably pretty close right through the end of the year. We aren't going to be leaving piles of leaves under the snow. If you get them out now, if you get them out this fall, yes, absolutely, we're going to be picking them up. It's going to snow again tomorrow. We're still going to pick them up. Look at our maps. We encourage you to do that, particularly for those of you that containerize. And we want to encourage people to containerize their leaves. Less, from a attractiveness perspective, you don't have all those piles. You don't have leaves blowing around. But maybe best of all, they get picked up quicker. Now, some communities require you to containerize your leaves. We don't. But they will get picked up more quickly. So all I can ask is that you be patient. We haven't forgotten your street. Our crews start from the west and move east, and then they go back and repeat. They're on that second pass now. They'll do at least one, probably two more passes through the town as needed, and they will pick up the leaves. If you have any questions, obviously you can call the Public Works Department, but I really want to encourage people, look, there are two maps. The first one is the bulk leaf map. The second one is the containerized leaf map, and that will show you, over the next day or two, where you can expect the crews to be and plan accordingly. But this is the toughest time of year for those folks. They're doing snow, they're doing leaves, and just a couple of traffic safety reminders. Those wet leaves on the street are incredibly slippery. So leave yourself plenty of stopping room this time of year. And also, when you see those plow trucks, as they were out today, give them room. They need twice as much room as you think they need. I'm reformed. After that first winter as supervisor, taking that ride with Dave Palmer, and watching, feeling just how big that truck is and seeing how it affects their ability to do their job if the cars get too close, try to pass them. You don't need to go 50 miles an hour. They're out because it's snowing. The roads are lousy. Give them a chance to do their job. Follow behind them. You'll get there. Leave yourself plenty of time. You'll get there. That's about it. Matters of the attorney to the town. I have nothing further. Matters of the town clerk.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Matters of the town board.
I did just want to highlight a couple of things with the recreation programs. I know it's winter out there, but there is still time to get in on some last-minute fun with our fall programs. We have classes that include the Tiny Tots horseback riding, which is held at an indoor but not heated riding ring, indoor disc golf putting league, and that's at the Brookside School. And there are also a few spaces left in our various levels of swimming programs, and they start on November 26th. Jason mentioned that we're renting the Brighton High School pool. Also, I wanted to mention that if in the upcoming days when you have no school, that's also no problem. Be sure to register now for our always exciting December recess camp, babysitter training class, home alone safety instruction, and ski and snowboard programs. They're all held during the kids' days off from school or even over December break. As always, registration is required and spaces are limited, and registration may be done online, by mail, or in person at the Recreation Department. That's townofbrighton.org/rec. And I wanted to mention that we're always accepting new students in our very flexible and affordable after-school program for children in 1st through 5th grades. It's held right here at the Brookside Recreation Center in town, and you can register for 1 or 5 days per week for the same price. Full details and a program handbook can be found, again, online at the town website. I wanted to highlight also one upcoming event, Friday with Frosty. That is going to be on Friday, December 7th at the Brighton Town Park Lodge, 777 Westfall Road. from 6:30 to 8 p.m., and the price is $8 per person. You can spend Friday night with Frosty, and we'll keep you warm with hot cocoa, donut holes, and make fun Frosty crafts. Don't forget your camera to get your picture taken with our very own Frosty the Snowman.
That's a cute event. I've been to that event. That's fun.
All families are welcome and registration is required. Hope to see you there.
Thanks, Robin. And I want to mention one other event. This past Monday, we honored our veterans at our Brighton Veterans Memorial. And as it always is, it was a wonderful ceremony. We paid tribute to our friend, our former colleague, Jim Vogel. Members of Jim's family were there. And we also recognized an organization that was truly near and dear to Jim's heart, Employer Support for the Guard and Reserve, ESGR, which is a group that is set up through the Department of Defense, but has a heavy volunteer component to it, and locally and nationally, they work to help Guard members and reservists who are working civilian jobs, but who have ongoing military service requirements that they fulfill. They also provide assistance to employers who want to make sure they're doing the right thing. They're following the law, following USERRA, which is the law that establishes the rights of Guard and Reserve members in the workplace. And they also act as a volunteer mediation group when there are misunderstandings between employers and employees with service commitments. The town of Brighton, Mike's predecessor, Tim Keefe, was recognized nominated by one of our department employees in gratitude for Tim's accommodation to him as a reserve member a few years back. So it's a great group, and it really was a double opportunity to pay tribute to a great man that we've said words about, but no words really suffice to characterize his life. Jim Vogel, our friend, and we do miss him. Can I have a motion? Any other matters of the board? Then can I have a motion to go into executive session to discuss a matter of litigation? I don't anticipate it'll take too long.
Good. So moved.
Second.
Dan, please call the roll.
Councilmember DeFazio?
Aye.
Councilmember Werner?
Councilmember Warner.
Aye. Excuse me. I was looking at my good friend over here.
Councilmember Wilt?
Aye.
Supervisor Mallon?
Aye. Thank you. Our next town board meeting will be November 28th at 7 o'clock right here in this room. And have a very happy Thanksgiving. See you then.